Hi, I'm Jonathan Anderson. We're here in London in my office, and we're here to talk through the menswear and womenswear SS21 collections. We would have done a men's and womenswear show at this time of year. Obviously, the circumstances happening globally have obviously changed the way in which we have approached this show, but in terms of myself and with the team, it's this idea of like an act of defiance to try to work creatively around solutions to be able to present something that I think is very important for us to keep the momentum. This season we've decided to kind of make it a piece of ephemera, this idea of mail art and kind of using pieces of printing techniques and leftover fabrics and pressing of flowers to sort of tell a story narrative through our process of the lockdown, quarantine, and the many things that have gone on since the beginning of the year. This season, we worked with OKRM and the entire the design team and all parts of the company to come up with a document that is to be sent via the mail. And, you know, it really was kind of looking at this idea of emotion when you kind of receive something, and the art of like packing. We took leftover fabrics and we screen printed a piece of text that I had done with a calligrapher. And inside you receive a folder which has components. Inside here is sort of interact. It comes with 4 handmade nails and a piece of wax cotton. The idea is that it's actually looking at the make, the idea that even something as simple as the nail can be made by hand. OKRM were able to kind of work with us and kind of coming up with a format of, you know, using different paper stocks, different fonts, and sort of like the idea of tactility. So with this paper, it's sort of a really kind of nice, it's got a nice patina to it. Inside, you are approached by, the collection we worked with an artist, Paul Anglada, and we made masks like this, in which we used, because obviously we couldn't use models, I wanted to create a character. So you have a mask, which then comes with the cord, which you can turn it into a mask for yourself. Every so often there's little pressed flowers. You know, I spent a lot of time in the garden, and I kind of thought that it was something that was really kind of this idea of like going back to making things on your own and how to kind of go back to handcraft or making or telling stories. In here you have the press release. I've included some swatches of fabric that we have in the collection, and this gives a very detailed list of what went on into each piece. Here are some materials that we have for it. And then each of the looks are presented in different formats. So, for example, we have this one, which is like perforated. Some go into A4, some are cut into 4s. And the idea is that you can tell and experience the story in your own way. And take time to kind of embrace each sort of thing in your own pace. I didn't really want to force it down people's throats. I wanted something that they could kind of have a cup of coffee in the morning and go through, or in the evening. And the idea is that you can take all these components and kind of reassemble. Each thing can be cut up, and then we have posters like this. So that kind of takes us all the way through like that. And then within men's, you know, I really love the first look. I like this idea of that we took all different MAC fabrics we'd ever used and we kind of collaged them into this idea of a kind of utilitarianness, this idea of patchwork, this idea of assemblage, you know, like kind of rebuilding on a silhouette that we had kind of focused on this idea of the cape. And how do you make the cape into a jacket, into a hoodie? And I really think there's something here that is sort of like, there is a timelessness to it, but at the same time there is an element that this piece is, you can't really place it within a decade, and I think that's something that I think is very, very important right now. In look 25, this one here, my grandmother many years ago had this sort of like needlepoint on in her house, and when she passed away she gave it to me, and it was like something that I've always had weirdly in every single studio. And when we were doing this collection, I kind of was like looking a lot at how people were kind of reverting back to craft and reverting back to making. So we redid the entire thing onto a sweater through hand knit, and then we kind of like flipped the colors. So I quite like the sort of outdoor boating psychedelia. And then with the Artist Pearl and Glada, we kind of transferred on, like in look 39, you have knits where we discharge printed on top. And this idea that the kind of nearly like hanging tapestries, this idea of kind of oversized knits that nearly became going back to this idea of the shared wardrobe where pieces are not really tied to any gender, it's whatever you want it to be. We did a lot of jacketing of different sort of like fabrics that you would nearly get, domestic fabrics like wallpapers and upholstery fabrics, and kind of nearly as if they were kind of put through a photocopier over and over again. So that was in look 26. And then we get on to women's. Once again, we've kind of taken the bags that we developed this season and classics like the cat bag. And this time we worked with a mask maker. I kind of like this idea that the women's was, you know, we have the illustration, we have like the kind of woven mask, this idea of like collaborating with different people in their own craft. And I like this idea that it was like kind of into the void nearly. And once again, it is on the similar format. So, you know, we really have a kind of like, you know, this exploration of like sort of draping and soft silhouettes. And this idea of going back to the mannequin, I found this whole process quite cathartic in a weird way, because it's actually made me feel like I've restarted my brand somehow. And I think it's been kind of a really beautiful process to kind of slow down and kind of embrace what we do best. This is a kind of a large poster, which we like. In the resort collection, we looked at this idea of kind of, you know, because we had to kind of work on a mannequin, it kind of made me kind of really think about how to use draping and how to use kind of flue in a very different way. I really like this look here. It nearly has like wings. It's sort of this idea that when the wearer is in it, it becomes a completely different thing. So this idea of motion becomes really important. I think because we were working statically, I think it was really good that we really engineered things that once they became off the mannequin, they became something which was sort of like quite poetic and light at the same time. The accessories this year, we've got some new bags. We've got a lid. We launched the season before. We had this one here, which is part of this family. Obviously, it's based on a very early 20s fisherman's bag, where you have these very hard lids. And I kind of like this idea of something which was like a fisherman's bag / a toolbox, something which sort of had craft at the heart of it. We worked with a basket maker to do a special edition. And then this is our new one, which I'm really excited about, because it's like a little bucket, but it's hard. So it's kind of quite petite, but sort of, I think it's really new in its approach. When I think of Britain, I always think of this idea of fishing as a kind of, it's a hobby, but at the same time it's a sport. There is something which is always about calmness and reflection. I think it's a kind of solitary thing sometimes to do as fishing. When I was researching all these kind of early bags, I kind of really liked that there was a lot of engineering on lids and things. There's a masculinity, there's a femininity to it, you know, so it's like the beauty case. So I'm super excited about this season. And then with men's, we have a new backpack where we've made it of recycled plastic bottles and recycled polyester, which we've been working on for a while. It's been something that I really wanted to get right as a kind of part of a building of new classicism within the brand. So through the box, you have these sort of like, I kind of like to see these as like pauses for thought or moments. Like everyone who has been at home, there's by watching the news or being around friends or family, and when you kind of looking at general media, there seems to be like pun lines, and I wanted to kind of think of positive things that have been said to me throughout this whole thing that really kind of has helped me get through this whole process creatively. And it's like, keep looking up, something I've always believed in, and is the idea of never to compromise. The end is the beginning, and the future is unwritten. And I think for me, we're in such a kind of poignant moment, but in a very exciting moment, because I think we can reinvent ourselves, we can reinvent how we approach creativity. I think creativity is incredibly important in times of in troubled times, because I think it makes us reconnect with the idea of making, the idea of creative philosophies, the idea of being able to kind of reinforce what you believe in, and sometimes to dismantle what you believe in. For me, these are kind of nearly like something that you would kind of find by accident in a library book. And I think it's sort of like a moment in time. For me, it's this moment is being kind of good to sort of embrace new ways of being able to communicate. I think going back to the making of like letter writing, or really kind of exploring how to kind of present information, has been something that I think has been really kind of, at some moments, poignant, and at the same time quite emotional to do. I think, this collection, I think I will always remember doing, and I'm glad in a weird way, I'm glad it was this way, because I think it is about the detail. It's about understanding who you are, why you design, and why I love making clothing and making products. And I like something that the viewer could take these pieces, you could nail the fabric to the wall, you can nail the mask and the string together, you can kind of create from this another collage. So it doesn't really finish here, it kind of will continue on to something else.